represented down in Bennington County. Richard, you want to?
Richard Nelson, Orleans 1, which is the town of Derby.
Ted Lipsky, Memorial One, Stowe.
Right, Bert, Cabot, Dan, Beecham.
John Bartholomew from Heartland, also representing Windsor and West Windsor.
Yeah, so if you want to introduce yourself for the record and anyone who's come with you that you want to introduce now, you can do that too.
Sure, I guess I could do that. So my name is Cindy Robillard. I have with me today our policy liaison, policy director, and our general counsel, Robert Depper, Rowan Hawthorne. You all know Steve Collier, who's here. He may be able to add something to this conversation as well. So I just want to give a quick introduction about myself so you know kind of what I bring to this conversation. I have been with the Department of Labor for 34 years. I like to say I kind of grew up doing workforce development, and that's totally true in a lot of ways. I'm from St. Johnsbury, so I worked providing direct services in our job centers in St. Johnsbury and Newport. I moved into a management role in both the Northeast Kingdom and Central Vermont over the years. And then in 2023, so about 3 years ago, I kind of put all my program knowledge and experience to work in this role that I'm in, which is the assistant director of the Workforce Development Division. And my primary function is to support a team of program administrators that administer our federal programs. So I have a staff of people, not a huge staff, a small staff of people that work and provide service through the H-2A program, among other programs, things like apprenticeship and our federal workforce funding, which is the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act. You may have heard, we like to call it WIOA. So those are kind of my responsibilities, and that's what brings me here today. So I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you all, and I love your interest in this program. Certainly, it's a critical economic driver for the Vermont ag economy. We are going to just start a little bit with a few high-level points about the H-2A program. Number one, it's a federal program. And so what I'm going to talk about today is our role and how we facilitate that. But essentially, it allows U.S. farm owners to bring foreign nationals to the U.S. It supports the agricultural sector, and it's been part of the national agricultural landscape since 1986. So it was part of the Immigration Reform and Control Act of '86. There was previous history as it evolved through the years, because there's always been a need to have foreign agricultural workers supporting our agricultural economy. And in doing a little research about the history, it sounds like in the early 2000s, it really started to ramp up quite a bit. Interesting fact you might be interested in is that in 2025, there were 320 or so H-2A visas issued in the United States.
Yeah.
2025.
320,000.
Does that seems like a big number, but do we know anything about, are there other data points? Is that a bigger number than it has been growing?
It's been growing.
Yeah,
steadily.
Is it capped?
It is not capped. We have two foreign labor programs. One is the H-2B program, which is for any non-agricultural workers, which is not what we're talking about today, but that program is capped.
Would that include any?
That includes workers who come here and ski areas, hospitality. Hospitality. I'm trying to think about, we are less involved. We don't have the hands-on oversight or the hands-on processing involvement with the H-2B program. Employer-driven program. They post their job openings, they meet certain requirements, and then they are awarded their visas. But it is capped, and it's much lower than that number.
So the department isn't like a go-between.
No.
That you might be here.
That's right.
Representative Bartholomew.
Maybe you're going to answer this, but how many are in Vermont, and do they, once they get the visa, do they move or they go to one place? And do we know how many are here?
Well, I have my next slide. I can tell you that in 2025, we received somewhere between 500 and 600 applications for H-2A visas. So that's the data that we are able to track. What we are not as easily able to track is actually how many of those are filled and how many come here. So, and I'm going to talk a little bit later in the conversation about the outreach work that we are required to do with our guest workers. And that's where we're gathering data on the numbers that actually receive a visa, travel, come here. I'm guessing that number is around 400 annually. That's our best
Out of
guess.
the 500 to 600.
Out of the 500 to 600 applications. Let's see. So I think you're all familiar with this, but this is a program that's for a seasonal need. So this is not a tool that would serve a year-round operation. So one of the things you won't see on this slide is dairy, but crops, maple production, poultry farms, recently hops production, logging, those kinds of, I don't know if we've seen too many logging applications, but
No, Lipsky had a stand
Yeah,
up.
Sorry.
That one struck a chord with me, so.
I'm not familiar in my short time.
Almost 60 years, and I've never seen a H-2A
Yeah.
log of wood. Some sawmills or this,
Yep.
bridge labor force. And stuff.
I have, in my time being, providing oversight, I have not seen a logging company's application come through either. So that there may have been a time when that was more widely used, or maybe not at all in Vermont. I'm not sure.
Logging is seasonal, I guess, in its own way, but it's different than growing season. Everything else.
Yeah, where would they put Christmas tree operations? Would they confuse that with logging? Because I know that I've seen the ad for people with big Christmas tree operations.
Based on what I think the definition is, that to me seems like it would be a seasonal operation we have a harvest. But I'm not familiar with any in my recent years of overseeing the processing. But, yeah.
Are Christmas trees an agricultural crop, not a forest? So.
But we define them, it might be different though, this federal,
Just for your interest, most of our workers come from Jamaica, Mexico, Guatemala, or Ecuador. So those are the primary countries that issue visas to workers to come here and perform agricultural work. Okay, so now I'm going to walk you through the process and try to make it clear a little bit about who's engaged in this process, who's got responsibilities for what points along the way, and what the Department of Labor's role is. So the farm owner needs to file an application or a job order between 60 and 75 days prior to the need. So prior to the time that the workers need to start. We use a system called FLAG because everything has an acronym. It's the Foreign Labor Application Gateway. It's really just a communication tool that either employers and their agents, they are able to enter the job posting there. The U.S. Department of Labor Office of Foreign Labor Certification, who reviews these and gives the final approval, is using the system. And then we at the Department of Labor here in Vermont are doing the pieces that we're responsible for and uploading and sharing information in that system. So to complete the package, the application package. So when we receive a job posting, the first thing we do is make sure it gets into our Vermont JobLink system. That is done for the purpose of recruiting, positive recruitment for U.S. workers. So basically the farms, the agricultural employers are posting the job in JobLink to show that they have attempted to fill their openings with domestic U.S. workers. And so that's, our system is called Vermont JobLink, and that's where those jobs get posted. I then provide information that says that box has been checked and that's done. That job posting needs to remain open until, I believe, 30 days before start. The next thing that we do at the Department of Labor is we order a pre-occupancy housing inspection. And we do this through an agreement with the Vermont Agency of Ag. And it's a really positive partnership in that they have ag inspectors who are out visiting farms for a multitude of reasons. They have relationships with farm owners, and it just makes a lot of sense. That's a fairly new MOU. I would say it's maybe been 3 or 4 years, something like that. So there's communication that goes back and forth. The inspection is completed. It includes a water test for all properties that are on municipal water. And then when all of those documents get back to me, I upload them into this flag system, and that really completes the package, except for one final piece, which is that I then have to go back to the job order that's been posted in JobLink and verify that no referrals for domestic US workers were made. Because if US workers are interested in applying for that opening, then the agricultural employer needs to consider them and interview them. And so that's what we're verifying. Let's see, am I missing anything? Workers. So when everything has been reviewed, there are processors called certifying officers, COs. That's an acronym that's used a lot in, I think, Chicago, that review all of the application, make sure all the parts, make sure all the timelines have been met. And then they issue a notice of approval to the farm. And it basically says that, you've done all the steps, and we're going to issue the visas. And then the workers, then the shift goes to working with the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services to get the workers their visas, match the visas, make the arrangements. And there are in-betweens, you probably can speak to this. There are intermediaries that navigate that, I think, for farm owners or to make that system a little bit easier. So any questions about that process?
Representative Burt?
Yeah.
Yeah. They used to be called bookends.
Reliable service.
Yeah. I thought I could do the ad part in the newspaper for the, because I do ads for business anyway, and that's like a nightmare, just that one bit. And so it's like $1,000 just to pay for the ad in the newspaper to advertise for the job position for domestic workers. And it's like the amount of regulations around it. I was like, okay, yeah. Have them do it.
Yeah, I would say percentage wise, I'm thinking about, I'm looking at my flag screen and I'm looking at this big column of, entries. I would say more than half of the employers use some kind of consultant or agent, I guess you would call them, to do this work.
If you were a new farmer and hadn't used the service before and didn't know how to find a consultant, would the department coordinate that, or? We could, but That doesn't happen all that often.
doesn't happen all that often. And, honestly, what we do is we refer them to a very detailed website, and there's a very articulate, like, these are the steps you need to take. But we do make referrals, and let them know there are agents out there that can help you. So, and it sounds like you get your money's worth.
Yeah.
Your thought is that, yeah.
And it sounds like, and I don't want to have this focus on any one person's business at all, but the second bullet point, then posting the job, that's one way to check that box? Could you also advertise it in
You can.
newspaper?
You have to use the state workforce agency's database. So every state has I think I put somewhere, they call us the SWA, the State Workforce Agency. So you are required to post your opening with the state workforce agency. their system. You can use other means to
If you
post
want to.
if you want to.
Yeah, okay. I mean, nowadays, most people seem to be finding jobs using 21st century technology rather than the newspaper, but okay. Any other questions about this process?
Process. Okay. So the contract that exists between the worker and the employer, there are several requirements that the employer has to agree to and, accept responsibility for. So there's the cost of the transportation, inbound and outbound. They need to provide housing, and that housing needs to meet all the applicable safety standards. Transportation to and from the work site, sometimes that's not a thing. But if your housing is 2 miles down the road, you have to be able to get your workers there. That's on you. Cover workers' comp. And then, one thing that doesn't get talked about too much, but it became an issue in some parts of the state in 23 and 24 with the flooding is there's a 3/4 guarantee for wages. And basically what that means is if weather or conditions or some factor are affecting the ability to be able to keep these workers whole while they're here, there's a minimum requirement that they have, they're paid for 3/4 of their contract time. So it's a protection, obviously, for the workers who have traveled here to do the work when things outside of anybody's control happen. So, and we did see it not in all parts of the state, obviously, but in some parts of the state where low-lying fields and things like that were flooded. And there was at least some time where they weren't able to, conduct any operations. So this exists in a contract, and these are there's many other details. These are the high-level ones that the employer is responsible for.
Representative Burt.
Clarification on the 3/4 of wages too. I came in 2023 when we got the frost. I had a conversation with the guys. I was like, I do the best I can here, but they are guaranteed. It's not you put in the application how many hours a week you guarantee them to work, or that you agree to pay to give them for work. But then it'd be, say I put in 40 hours, right? It would guarantee that they at least work 30 and get paid. They get paid full rate, but they might work 10 if you don't have a crop.
Yeah.
Yep.
And Representative Burt, you're growing apples. That frost was in May. That's the one you're talking about,
Yeah.
about 2023.
Yeah, and I already have guys there for planting, so
They were already
you
there.
don't know if you're gonna get a crop, right?
Yeah.
Even with flooding, you might almost get to where you get a crop and then you don't. Yeah.
So,
Representative Bartholomew.
yeah, thank you.
If you don't know, but the workers came like, in your case, after the frost happened, or no, yeah, where they were planning to come, couldn't you cancel? Like, okay, I mean, we needed them to pick, but there's not gonna be a crop.
Process in my head, like if you're halfway through all the paperwork and I don't
Or,
know.
you've got everything lined up and they're due to come on June 1st and there's a frost May 15th. No,
Yeah,
you stuck?
could look into that. I don't know the answer. Yeah, it's interesting to think about that for sure.
Nelson?
So if you're guaranteed for 3/4 of them and you put in for 40 hours a week, and in the case of a vegetable farm, they put in a lot of hours early, and then you have flood, you lose your crop. When you put in for 40 hours a week and they work 50 hours a week, you're 20 hours over that 3/4. Does that carry forward all the way through, or are you required to have cover them for 30 hours a week after the event happens? I just curious.
I could look into that for sure.
Yeah, there is. I mean, and if you put in for 40 and they work 40 hours for 3/4 of a season with you, then you have the event that slams the door shut on your harvest. Have you met your obligation? Because you covered it 3/4 of the season anyway.
Yeah, I can double check on that. I actually think that the 3/4 requirement is of the whole season. It's about a week in time, but it's also about the whole season.
I also understand if you have the same people come from Jamaica every year to work on their farm, you're probably gonna try to help take care of them because you want them back again next year.
Oh. Lots of hypotheticals, but something you just said made me wonder about, overtime. Are there plus 40-hour weeks? Is that,
There are plus 40-hour weeks, but I
just-
think it's at straight time.
okay,
Straight
so
time.
it'd be built into the contract.
It is built into the contract. Yes.
New York.
Okay, so I'm going to move on to the adverse effect wage rate that we like to refer to as AWR. Basically, the U.S. Department of Labor sets the rate for wages with this program. The required minimum H-2A AWR rate is in place so that we can ensure that the hiring of foreign workers doesn't adversely affect the wages and working conditions of similarly employed U.S. workers. So that's the kind of thinking behind the fact that we have this rate. On this slide, you can see the progression of the history of the rate between 2021 and 2025. And so, during those years, we were seeing very, very regular increases in this hourly rate. It's set annually, and certainly in those years, it did see significant growth.
And that's calculated by a federal.
There's a federal formula.
agency.
Yes. Yep.
And is this the same rate across the whole country or is this rate special?
It's unique to each state. Each state has its own AWR.
Entire state,
It's one
statewide.
rate for the state. That's correct. Until last year, when the AWR had some significant changes in its structure and its, design. There was an interim final rule released last October that basically made an adjustment to this rate. And it is now based, well, it's certainly adjusted downward, as you can see from this set of figures, but it's also broken into skill level. And the blue column is the rate that would need to be paid to US workers. The red color column is for the H-2A workers. And then within each, there are skill level 1 and 2. Skill level 1 is less than 3 months. Skill level 2 is 3 months or more. And then something new is that it now includes something called the adverse compensation adjustment, which is a deduction that an employer can take to account for the housing allowance or housing that's being provided. Let's see, what would I like to say about that? What we have seen from the applications that have arrived from January, that I have processed and we've received from January 1st till now, is that about 70% of the employers are choosing to pay the former AWR rate or something higher than this current AWR rate. I've actually seen some applications that say a wage rate will be adjusted based on experience. The Office of Foreign Labor Certification reviews that and will make their decision based on whether they feel like that's an adequate statement to make. But I think the thing to remember about this is a program that there's a lot of history in many cases with the workers and the farm owners. And I think that there's a lot of factors that go into setting a wage rate. So being told what the wage rate is, and then being an employer who would like some independence in what you do to set your wage rate. In some ways, this new system allows for it to be a possibility.
Floor,
This is the floor.
and has it always been a floor?
It has always been a minimum, yes.
Yeah, okay, so employers can make a choice, whether to pay this rate or something higher.
Correct.
Representative Boswell.
Yeah, can you say a little bit more about the housing cost adjustment? Like how much you said that like the wages can be reduced because you have the housing. So what's that look like?
It's $1.61.
Oh, that's
It's
it.
set.
So it's only, okay,
It's set.
so it's very modest.
Yep, this is the tool that, basically what you're seeing here is a snip from a big, long spreadsheet that has an amount for every state.
Yeah.
And this is what Vermont is looking at right now.
I noticed our state code is 50.
Oh.
At the top of- bottom of the list.
Top of the bottom.
So the $1.61, that's what can be deducted per hour.
Per hour.
Yeah. And it looks like that's the difference between the blue and the red. So the US worker gets $15.96.
Yep. If
The
they're skill level one, yes.
foreign worker gets $15.96, and you subtract out the housing amount, and it's $14.35.
Yeah.
So. And again, this is a minimum for US workers, so the US worker could be paid more.
Absolutely. Yeah. So when the job postings go up in our system, they have to be posted at a minimum of $15.96. So one of my roles is to scan those before they get actually entered into the system. And if I saw something less than $15.96, I would reach out to the employer or the agent in whatever case the case was and ask what was going on there, because that's the required, because again, the whole point of the job posting is that we're looking to recruit US domestic workers. And that's where we have to start there.
So the $1.61, that's a statewide number.
It is.
So, yeah, so, seems like a small number if you multiplied it by 40 hours a week. And then you figured out how much was that per month. Still seems like it would probably be a small number for the amount that an employer can attribute to housing costs.
Costs, right?
Representative Bartholomew.
Just to make sure I understood what you just said, the 1435 is including the subtraction of the 161.
No, it's not.
It's not. So the actual rate they're getting is 161 less per hour, 12 something. Is that right?
My
It could very well be
The other way
that.
around.
This is Robert Depper, I'm General Counsel for Labor. It could very well be that. I mean, it just so happens right here that 161 is subtracted out on IAW on the adverse effect wage rate for workers from other countries. But it could very well be lower than 1435. Based on, how much based on that 161 adverse compensation adjustment.
Maybe we can clarify that, because I'm confused then if that's not the actual amount, because it seems like if you just take the blue numbers and subtract 161, you get the numbers that are showing for the
That
red.
is true. So these will be US workers that presumably don't have to have housing.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
The red would be foreign workers that presumably, again, do have to have housing.
Right.
Now, there are potentially circumstances, and I couldn't necessarily list them off right now, but there are circumstances that I've seen in some reporting and just some lawyer analysis that, there are circumstances where that 161 could be taken off skill level 1 and it could drop from.
Thank you.
We can do a little bit more digging. I mean, this is a very complex set of, trying to understand how we arrived at this. And there's been, minimal, official guidance, I would say. So I think it's fair that we might need to get back to you with some more details on that. Yep. Okay, so we know what they're going to pay. Now we're moving on to the housing. So employers have to provide housing to H-2A workers in, you know, in reason and safe and well then wait a minute, hold on, I'm losing my thought. This is for H-2A workers, you have to be able to provide housing because they're not able to return to their home at night, obviously. If an employer elects some sort of public housing, that we have different inspection requirements for that. But basically, this is where we actively engage with our Agency of Ag partners to have housing inspections conducted. There's a checklist that those housing inspectors follow to make sure that, you know, it covers things like the number of square feet, the number of beds, egress, you know, I have it with me. If anybody wanted to see a copy of it, I can certainly send it around. But there's a fairly extensive checklist that goes into making sure that the housing is safe and adequate. We have, in the last couple of years, decided that in partnership with the Agency of Agriculture and the Department of the Vermont Fire Safety, needed to be a little bit more take an educational approach to making sure that housing is lining up and fitting all the requirements. So we've, because there's often some confusion. There are a lot of pieces of this that could be very confusing. And so we have done some direct mailings out to our agriculture employers who use this program with some, you know, frequently asked questions and, you know, here are some high-level facts that you should know. We offered some information sessions around this last fall. And we're going to continue to do that because this is one of those areas that is just really critical that we make sure that the people who come here to work do have the right kind of housing, that it's safe and meets all the standards that it has to meet. Does anybody have any questions about the housing? All right, so now we move to the phase where the workers are here. And then our role really shifts, our funding shifts for first, because the processing on the front end of, you know, that the application, the housing inspection, the posting of job order, that's funded by the Office of Foreign Labor Certification. And we get a minimal amount of money annually to do that work. Then we move to providing reemployment or employment services to migrant seasonal farm workers. And to do that, we are required to have an outreach position. Lots of states have many outreach positions. Vermont has one. And we are needing to, while the workers are here, we have an obligation to conduct field visits, to visit those workers in their working and living space. We are needing, the goals of those visits are really to educate workers on resources, make referrals to things that they may be needing while they're here. There are a couple of free clinics that we refer people to healthcare for, food banks if that's something they need, English as a second language. And some of this stuff never even gets, you know, they don't take us up on it, but we have an obligation to go out and provide it. We also have an obligation to provide an explanation of the employment service complaint system. This is a vulnerable population, and we want to make sure that they understand that they can raise any concerns, and there's a mechanism for them to do that.
Is that, so the obligation is a federal obligation, and does the federal government reimburse the state?
We, not to get too into the weeds, but we receive a base amount of employment service funding under the Wagner-Peiser Act. And that is for, and this work is covered under that. It also covers our need to have a position in our system called the State Monitor Advocate, who is, every state has one. Their role is to review complaints and help manage the processing of those complaints, get them to the right enforcement or investigation bodies to be able to bring those complaints to resolution quickly. The thing about any complaints that come from migrant seasonal farm workers is they're only here for a short period of time. So if there's the need for resolution, we need to be acting quickly to be able to make that happen. With the employer visits, our team is energetic, they're friendly, they work with employers to schedule a time that works. We understand that there's work to be done, so we talk about we could visit at lunch or we could come after work. We really try to offer as flexible a schedule as possible to be able to get those visits in and check in with folks.
Representative Burt?
Curious, do you work with Bridges to Health?
Yeah. Bridges to Health and the Open Door Clinic in Middlebury are primary healthcare resources for folks.
There.
Yep. Okay, so I just wanted to touch quickly on the employment service complaint system. I already have mentioned that each state has a state monitor advocate. You know, that system is in place to protect these workers. I think I'll generally say that we have had really relatively low numbers of complaints across state government, across our employment service complaint system. I guess that could mean that our employers are doing a very good job. But complaints can be made by an individual. So a specific worker could raise a concern with us about, you know, maybe it would be about their pay, like they didn't receive their payroll in a timely manner, or their checks aren't adding up the way they should, something specific to an individual. Or they can be filed, a complaint can be filed as an apparent violation, which is on behalf of something that was observed or witnessed by a partner group, a group of employees, you know, a concerned citizen. So apparent violations come to us in a lot of different ways. The state monitor advocate reviews those complaints and then refers them to the proper enforcement authority. So we get my complaint form in front of me here, so because I bet you're going to ask some questions about that. And then I have on the next slide, I have some stats on just the last couple of years, because tracking complaints is something that we've had to renew our I don't know, commitment to, I guess I'll say. And so I have some stats from 2024 and some stats from 2025. We probably have them from 2023 and past, but they were not easily available. So I can get them for you if you'd like them. But again, these are the numbers, the total number of complaints. Those complaints can come from anyone who has a concern about their employment situation. And it can cover things that are like wage related, health and safety, housing, pesticides, discrimination, sexual harassment, transportation, trafficking, and they even allow us to put in other, because who knows what we might see or hear about. So the one thing that's really important about migrant seasonal farm workers is that while all complaints are received and sent to the proper enforcement authority, the ones that we have an obligation to see to resolution are those of migrant seasonal farm workers. So an example might be that we would receive a complaint from a store where the workers came to work one day and there was no heat. I'm just using this as an example. So they filed a complaint and we referred it to our VOSHA folks, and that's our end of the obligation there. Like, we're going to refer it to VOSHA and they're going to work through it. And that's where our responsibility to follow it ends. But if something like that was happening with a migrant seasonal farm worker, our state monitor advocate will continue to work with the worker and the whoever the enforcement authority is and the employer, if that's appropriate, to make sure that whatever the issue was has been resolved. This shows where we refer our complaints. We have enforcement groups, agencies or entities in Vermont. We have Vermont VOSHA. Their responsibility is for farms with over 10 migrant seasonal farm workers. We have a Vermont Wage and Hour Division, and we have the Vermont Attorney General's Civil Rights Division, who receives some of our complaints. We also partner very closely with the U.S. Department of Labor, who has ultimate authority over the H-2A program. And so some complaints are referred to a US DOL, Wage and Hour, and they then send someone here. One thing that to note about US Wage and Hour is there's not a Vermont US Wage and Hour presence that I think it's been closed for a few years. There used to be an office in Burlington. But so we receive services from Wage and Hour out of New Hampshire, and they cover Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont. So if there's something that needs to be investigated, they send somebody over to do that.
So you may have explained this, the numbers on the right are the seasonal farm worker numbers, but
The number on the right are the number of total complaints. So that could be from any worker about any employer. And then the migrant seasonal farm worker is the right-hand column. Yes,
so any employer in the state,
any employer in the state,
any job.
any job.
Okay, so relatively few, none in 2025 for this program.
Yeah. Yeah, the numbers are pretty low. We, yeah, zeros pretty low. So that is the last slide I have. I'm happy to take any other questions.
Thank you. Very helpful. Representative Bartholomew.
You mentioned that it doesn't include dairy. Is dairy specifically excluded, or is it just not practical because of the year-long cycle?
It's because it doesn't meet the test of temporary seasonal. In order to use the H-2A program, your need has to be a temporary seasonal, like a peak season nature, and you have to be able to define the period you need them.
You're a dairy farmer and you have an employee who gets elected to the legislature and is gone seasonal. It doesn't.
Don't think that's gonna work.
They're just happy they don't have to pay me in the winter.
Representative Lipsky.
Yes, thank you. My question really, what farmers are aware of and my constituents that stand, mostly dairy farmers that really stand on their heads to make sure their workers get access to the grocery store, food, healthcare, and I'm assuming that's so even for the part-time seasonal. But the actual cost of food, I mean, the housing deduction is tiny. The average Vermonter, some moderate income Vermonter might put 35 to 55% of their gross annual income into housing.
Right.
That may include utilities, but that may not include food.
Yeah.
So, if you're on a food farm, for instance, how do they get fed? That's the first question.
Well,
Or
if,
medical care.
right. So I guess what I can answer is that farms who provide housing can, if they provide a kitchen and the space for the preparation of food, then they need to make it reasonably possible for those workers to be able to access groceries and purchase that food. Now, sometimes we've seen where it is possible for an employer to choose, think I've seen one. I guess it's possible, but I know it's possible because I've seen it in the job postings of examples I've seen. They can provide a daily allowance for food if they don't provide the space for preparation of food. So in other words, if their housing is maybe using a motel and there's not space to properly cook the food that needs to be cooked, then they can issue them daily a food allowance to cover those costs.
The follow-up question is really, it's because of these times that you're not on, have Vermont Department of Labor had to deal with any of these seasonal workers being swept up in any sort of immigration that have been.
I think the thing to remember about these workers is they are as documented as they could be. These,
There's no.
I know. But, I think the workers, they're here for a specific reason. Our outreach people encourage them to, carry their documents, their visas with them. So I don't have any,
No.
stories or anecdotal stories about that. Yeah, I wouldn't venture a guess.
Thank
Again, you may have mentioned this earlier in the presentation. How long has the program been in existence?
It was part of, I have that. 1992. I think it's 1992. Created by the Immigration Reform and Control Act. Oh, I'm sorry, 86.
1986, okay. So prior to that, something else, there, who knows what the world was like, but collectively, wise minds came together and set up this system.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good to know. And the sort of, if we step back and think about why do we need the program, and what I mean by that is, why do we need to have workers from another country in our country doing the agricultural work? You may have
I
commented on that in the beginning too. But I want to ask the witness for that question.
Okay. Well, I think that one thing I can point to is that we post the jobs. We advertise the jobs through the system to US workers. And 99% of the time when I have to respond to that part of the application process, my note says no referrals made, which means that people aren't applying for the jobs. So that's one thing I could, say about that.
And do we believe that people who might be eligible and qualified and interested in doing the work are aware of the posting?
That's an interesting question. There have been some recent discussions with the U.S. Department of Labor providing some strategies for more active outreach to make our U.S. domestic workers aware. And so, they have lots of ideas about how we can do that. And they also, fund about half a position. So we're going to approach that with whatever we can best do, we're going to do that. The jobs are posted. We publish a weekly newsletter that goes out to, I think our mailing list is between around 20 to 25,000 people. And we do mix these openings in with that outreach, so it does go out to the public in that way. But if they're not looking in the JobLink system, your point, I think, is that they could miss the opportunity.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Rowan Hawthorne, Policy Director at the Department of Labor. The only other thing I wanted to add to that to answer your question is that we all know we have a workforce crisis here in Vermont. And so that's, let's say we're estimating around 400 individuals who are coming here to fill those positions. If we didn't have this program, that would be 400 positions that are unfilled, that are not being held on farms. Because like Cindy said, if the positions were to be filled by Vermonters, would have likely been filled. And so, theoretically, this program could be taken away and then employers would have to continue raising that hourly rate in order to attract workers, but that would really hurt the farm. So it's kind of this, it's a hard decision that farmers would end up having to make, but this program really helps fill those 400 positions that we otherwise don't have. And as we know, agriculture is incredibly important to Vermont. So it's a important part of the program and
Thanks.
it's a really big help here as we're experiencing this crisis.
That's good.
Thank you. Yeah, we touched a little bit on the change over the years and the rate and then the rule that is called the interim final rule, I think was the.
Interim final rule.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What does that mean, interim final rule? You know? Rulemaking is a bit of a mystery to us, so.
I'm gonna lean on the general counsel for his thoughts on that.
So interim final rule is kind of just what it says. It's not the final rule, right? They're in the process of noticing comment, I believe, right now. If this is their guidance that they're giving out, it's going to be the rule to get ready. This is what we're doing. And then, of course, they submit it, or the federal government puts out guidance along with the rules. So we've seen this a lot with the federal government lately, that they will kind of make an interim change to a rule. They'll say this is what the rule is going to be. And then they issue guidance that says you better do it now.
Mhm.
Right. So that's why you're getting a lot of lawsuits about how these rules are coming down, because whether or not an interim final rule is actually a rule, well, reasonable minds might disagree, but the federal government certainly thinks it is.
Yeah, okay. And then, so like any rulemaking, there's, the public can comment. Has the state, would the state comment on a rule change like this proposal?
We can submit comments to rulemaking. We have in the past over, different types of federal application.
Do you know what the state did in this case?
I do not.
I think the reason that we thought it would be helpful to have, so let me back up and say, it's been very helpful just to get broader understanding of the program, which some of us, again, may have understood pretty well and others didn't. But just in terms of the rule change, then the effect or the impact that will have on employers, for one thing, and then on the employees themselves. Do you have any thoughts on that? I mean, it seems like there are two things happening. One, there's the housing carved out. But then separately from that, there's now these two levels, but used to only be one.
Yes.
Any thoughts on that?
I guess that my thought is that these workers are really important to these operations. And I know that the Vermont employers who bring workers here would be it would be a struggle, as Rowan mentioned, I think, to fill these positions. So the fact that close to 70% have elected to pay the higher rate tells me that they want to continue to do that, and they want to continue to, have the same folks come year after year that they're used to seeing and that they count on to do the work. And so, and yeah, that's, I guess, what I could say. I don't know if you wanted to add anything, Robert.
Well, not for that, no, but I did want to fill out the interim final rule. So with an interim final rule, there is notice and comment, but it's after the rule is issued.
Right.
So it's kind of, the federal government, there's a good cause existence, the notice and comment do it flow away. And so the federal government essentially says, hey, it's an emergency, we need this rule now. And so that's why we haven't done notice and comment from this. This just came out not too long ago. So the notice and comment is typically accepted after.
Okay. I saw your hand up, Richard. Did you have a question earlier?
No, I was gonna make a comment, but I don't need to.
Well, why don't we take one more question then?
So with the new interim final rule and the two-tier pricing, I can see the advantage if you get a new person to your operation. There is a training period before they're up and running. So it gives the farmer that opportunity to train. And a lot of the farms get the same workers back every year. But I'm sure eventually somebody times out. They're not coming back anymore and you get a new one. are you required to take the same people every year? I mean, you know, Brett Burt fills out the paperwork, gets, I don't know, what do you get, 25, 30 of them? Yeah, would you get 2, 3, 4, whatever? How do you know you're gonna get the same people back every year? I mean, who makes the determination of who? Once you get the okay, then you contact them to fill out the visa work, is that how it goes?
I would not be the best person to answer that in this room because once I, send it along, then it moves to a different part of the federal government to handle the visa issuing and the matching. These folks have support from, there's a Jamaican liaison, there's the Mexican consulate. So there are intermediary type people that are involved in that process that support that, but I don't know how the same people come every year.
And the same thing could be said on the other end, someone in Jamaica says, I want to go back to the US to work in an apple orchard, but I'm not going back to that place again.
Mhm.
Yeah, they have J numbers if you, speaking to that. And you can request the same person.
Yeah.
And they obviously have to agree to come back.
Yeah, okay.
Representative Boston.
Yeah, I mean, I can just say, I know a couple of farms in my area that have Jamaican workers that have been coming back for over 20 years. And I don't know if that's the case in most farms that you get set and there's a lot of return customers, but like the two that I know, there's a lot of them that keep coming back, that are, very reliable. They're like they become like family members for the farms.
But my cousins on Nantucket Island had
Yeah.
a 10-acre
Yeah,
garden farm there, and they get the same workers back, and after the hurricane hit, my cousin was shipping chainsaws to Jamaica for
yeah,
his team.
yeah.
I mean, there was that's a good point that you made. And in Vermont last year in the fall, when the terrible storm hit Jamaica, there was a real heavy, huge outreach of support to be able to, raise money and send funds home if possible, or send funds with these folks to be able to, help their families. So your point is very, very much accurate.
Is the Department of Labor fully staffed or reasonably fully staffed?
I think we are right now. We're happy about that. Yeah, this team is, I have an outreach worker, I have a state monitor advocate. So yeah, we're in pretty good shape.
Any other questions? Or anything else that you wanted to?
No, but just thanks for having me. This was a really great conversation and I appreciate your interest in the program.
Can we get the federal government to finish fixing the H-2A process to include Daryl?
I'll take that on.
We'd all like to take that on. All right, why don't we take 10 minutes